Good morning and welcome to How to Be a Great Ambassador for the STEM session. I'd like to begin this session by inviting one of our panellists, Corey Tutt, to offer an acknowledgement of country. Over to you, Corey. Corey's giving an acknowledgement of country.
Hello, can you hear me now? Can I do it now?
Yeah, go Corey. Sorry about that.
That's all good. Hello, everyone. My name's Corey Tutt. I'm a man, and I'm on the lands of the Gadigal people today. I'd just like to pay my respects to the first scientists, our ancestors, elders emerging, young people doing deadly stuff in STEM. Our people were the first scientists, we're the first engineers, we're the first bush chemists, we're the first pharmacists, we're the first astronomers. If you're the first forensic scientist, if you're a gammon fella and you get lost in the book, we were finding the black fellas found you. So, this is, it's important that today of all days, whilst we're acknowledging the lands that we're on and we're acknowledging the ancestors and the elders that have paved the way for us to be here today, we pay our respects to young people around the country, young deadly people in STEM, and paving the way for future scientists. So I'd just like to acknowledge our people and also the original scientists, the first scientists of Australia.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks a lot for that really inspiring acknowledgement of country. So my name's Sandra Gardam and I'm the manager of the Superstars of STEM program here at Science and Technology Australia. Now, the Superstars of STEM program provides advanced communication to women in STEM and really enables them to help them build a public profile. And the whole aim of the program is to shift the gender balance in the voices that we hear in the media talking about STEM and ultimately change stereotypes in our society. Now, making a really, really big task. Our panelists today take on big tasks like this in their spare time and sometimes in their extra time and sometimes in their every waking minute. So they're all ambassadors in one way or another, and today that they're here to share with you how they go about doing that. So get ready to be inspired. So you've already met Corey Tutt. He's a proud Kamilaroi man and he's the founder of Deadly Science. It's an organisation which connects remote schools in Australia with science resources. Corey is going to be joined today on our panel by Rashina Hoda, who's a software engineer and one of our superstars of STEM. And also, hopefully, Dr. Mohammed Taha. They're having a little bit of trouble joining today. Mohammed is the co-chair of the Victorian chapter in science and an engineer and researcher at the University of Melbourne. Hopefully they'll be able to join us a little bit later. We also on the panel today have Brenda Lim. Brenda's a researcher at CSIRO and she investigates the impact and the importance of green spaces on our urban environments. Brenda is also one of STA's STEM Ambassadors. So what she does is regularly meets with the MP in her electorate, Graham Perrott, to discuss STEM and to help him interact with the greater STEM sector and the greater STEM professionals in her electorate. So thank you to all of the panel for joining us. Now to the audience, you must be old hands at this by now, but if you have any questions throughout, please add them to the Q&A chat. Now, Brenda, I'm going to start with you. In addition to being a STEM ambassador at STA, you've also taken part in a similar program in the US as part of the American Association's Advancement for Science Policy Fellow. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like taking part in an organised program that creates an interaction between scientists and policymakers or politicians? And what did you get out of the programs? And really importantly, of course, how is it different in the US than it is in Australia?
Thanks, Sandra. I might start with the AAAS program in the US, just because that's kind of my initial foray into understanding where science and policy interact and meet. And the AAAS program, it's the Association for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and they are the organization that has the journal Science as well. And one of the goals is to ensure that science is heard in policy making at all different parts of the government. And so they take a cohort of scientists every year, and they embed them into the Department of Defense, into EPA, into national parks. But they also embed a group of scientists into all the in congressional seats in the Senate. And in a way, that was a really great introduction into science and policy, because it really showed there really aren't a lot of scientists in the government, right, or in Congress and Senate, right? And we had discussions where they said, well, basically, if any science question comes up in the Congress or in the Senate, they go to one person that they know has a science background, and they're like, hey, you know science, you deal with this policy. Right, and that points to this severe lack of science understanding and understanding how to move forward that policy. And so it was great working in the AAAS policy program, because we knew each other, right? So I had someone in Dick Durbin's office who would say, "Okay, Dick is sitting on the Senate Urban Ag committee now. He needs to understand this, this, and this. Can you come and brief him about this?" Or we're starting a new policy on solar cell arrays. Who of you knows enough about that to give the Senate committee enough information to make a decision? And so I think one of the challenges I found is that all the information is very quick, very sharp. There's no paper you can give them. They want everything in a paragraph or less. And I think as scientists, it's really hard to fully discuss the complexity of a science topic in that. But going to the STEM Ambassador program, what was really nice about moving to the STEM Ambassador program is that each STEM Ambassador is matched with the member of parliament from your seat, or from where you're working, the seat where you're working. And that gives you so much more contact with someone who is directly working with people in your seat and working with the questions and the topics going around in your seat. And I sit in an interesting area because we have a number of universities in the area. I work at CSIRO, and so that adds some other complications to being a STEM ambassador, in terms of that CSIRO has its own minister, but then I'm also trying to relay information to Mr. Parrott. But it's great to be able to actually work so directly with somebody, to ask them questions, but then for them to ask you questions, and for you to be able to provide that information to them. And then we also did some fun stuff, like we went to a park on National Science Week, and we filmed some science experiments at the park. That was that was fun, but it was great to be able to interact so closely with someone in that sense.
Thank you, Brenda. That's really interesting. Rashina, can I bring you in the conversation? Your research, your scientific research, focuses on how people work together to make really great software, not really great research. What has this taught you about how to communicate your ideas and your passions effectively? And can you tell us some of the ways that you're being an ambassador for this emerging and important field of technological development?
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks, STA, for organizing this. I'm so excited to be here and representing the superstars of STEM. So hi, all my superstar sisters out there. Hello. To get to your question, Sandra, yes, studying the software engineers out there has taught me a lot. The one thing that I see that is becoming increasingly common about software engineers as well as researchers like myself is you can no longer afford to communicate within your own comfort zones. That's just not a possibility anymore. In order to be effective in whatever it is that we do and achieve impact at a larger scale, we have to learn to diversify the venues that we engage in, to expand our networks beyond our colleagues, and to become increasingly comfortable at communicating with people from a different, wide range of different backgrounds. So I've thought of 4 different ways I think I'm acting on those principles to act as an ambassador of STEM, in particular software engineering. And so one of the things that I do is I make sure that I present at a practitioner-based venue or event every year. So because my research focuses on agile software development, that would be presenting. In the past, I've been invited to present at Agile New Zealand, Agile India, Middle East. I'm going to be speaking in Agile Australia this year. So that's not your average research venue. That does not come with a publication, but it's just amazing because oftentimes mine is the only research talk on the agenda, and then people come up to you because they're curious. They're like, wait, what is this about? This is different. And the interaction is amazing, and I also gain from it. It's not just giving, it's also gaining, because practitioners bring this amazing, practical outlook on everything, and that really feeds back into my research and reminds me to be practical and real world focused at all times. So that's one. And the other is general public venues and media engagement. And I have to say this was a difficult one, and I'm still on that journey, but getting lots of training from Superstars of STEM program and from Monash. And I'm working on it. So for example, there would be the Monash Lens article or TED Talk. And then the Lens article actually got picked up by the ABC Drum. And then we went from there. So you can have a series of cascading effects of your reaching out to different media. The third one is social media. So again, one of the things I've been working on is just being more active on social media. And one of the things I always say is it is the silence of the wise that actually hurts more than the noise of the ill-informed. So there's a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of people just saying whatever they want. And for us researchers, oftentimes we are a bit too cautious, and we are silent on things that we should really be speaking about. So social media is a great place to do that. So I'm on Twitter, for example, LinkedIn, and so forth. And finally, I've got this amazing opportunity to be an ambassador of STEM in a very formal way through the Superstars of STEM program. So yeah, those are 4 ways in which I'm acting as a STEM ambassador at the moment. And just finishing with one thing on that one is, I know it sounds like a lot, but if you're just starting out, what I would recommend is to definitely seek professional development opportunities, such as mid-year training, and to aim to present at least one non-research based event in your year, at least one. Yeah.
Thanks, Rashina. That's an amazing amount of information to have shared with them already. What I loved the most is that the feeling that part of the reason that you're an ambassador is that it actually comes back to you almost, I don't know, fourfold or something in what it gives you to continue your own research. So that's really interesting. Mohammed, can I bring you in here? As I mentioned in the introduction, and thank you for overcoming the technical issues and making it all the way in. I mentioned in the introduction that you're the co-chair of the Victorian chapter of Queers in Science. You're also an executive member of the Early and Mid-Career Researcher Forum. Can you talk to us and the audience a little bit about how and why you got involved in these types of groups, these types of advocacy groups, if you like, and how they help you with your shared goal of fostering stronger diversity and inclusion in the STEM sector?
Well, my general attitude in science and in life in general, I'm in perpetual state of dissatisfaction with status quo. So I never look at anything, whether it's science or diversity, and think that it's complete. So an attitude of constant growth is what always drives me when in anything I do. Thing is, because when I started my undergraduate degree, there was like there was like actually not a single person that I shared genuine, like anything genuine with them, because our kind of like things in common stopped in the classroom. And then that has tremendous impact on the individual because, you know, we go to classrooms and we go to workplaces to share in our lives. So when you are unable to do that, you cannot succeed as well as the people around you. And that is a great disadvantage to anyone who is not part of mainstream society. So why do we have a disadvantage and an unfair advantage to some of my peers? So those are kind of like the drive. And I'm a big believer in when something is broken, you put your hand up and you roll up your sleeves to fix it. I've never been a passive spectator. I understand, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes people do need to regroup and recharge and look after themselves. But yeah, I've always been kind of pushing the boulder up the hill, hoping that, you know, there's a nice construction up top to kind of to make. My vision of diversity is quite simple. Diversity is like the invention of electricity. We no longer need to have people putting out candles on the street. And so like we just need to kind of like get on the wiring to get the electricity everywhere, to have that, you know, that unique perspective and the diversity of opinion, instead of just like leading on a singular worldview, because it's not helpful. It's not going to solve any current problems or any future problems. So like it is in everyone's interest to move forward and start using electricity, and maybe just leave the candles when you're having a nice and relaxing evening over dinner. Yeah, that's so that's my drive when it comes to diversity.
I love that, Mohammed. Thank you. Corey, every time I have the pleasure of interacting with you, I feel your passion for what you do. Can you share that with the audience today, about what really drives you in creating your incredibly successful organisation, Deadly Science, and how you approach being a visible ambassador and a leader? And I think you might have some really exciting news to share with us today as well. So I'm looking forward to finding out what that is.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And hi, everyone watching from home or your workplace. Hope you're okay. You know, the biggest thing for me, and the most sort of like the most visible thing when we speak about diversity in STEM, and the biggest thing for young people is visibility, and you can't be what you can't see. And now we all love chemistry, and there's two simple ingredients that we all need, and that's passion and purpose. And especially young people, because young people are full of passion, whether they like lizards or cars or mechanics or, you know, you name it. That's why we're in science, isn't it? Because we've all got that passion project. But somewhere along the lines, there's sometimes circuit breakers where, you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids are unconsciously or consciously told that they can't follow a passion. And this happened with me when I was younger. I was 16. I wanted to be a zookeeper. Look, Bindi Irwin's living my dream at the moment. But, you know, for me, you know, to actually break that cycle and challenge that notion is a very difficult thing to do. Even today with Deadly Science, despite how successful it is, you know, if I've always got, you know, people sort of saying, oh, well, this organization does this over here, but then they sort of discount what I'm doing with Deadly Science. So again, we have to break down those barriers that stop us from making science more diverse. And I think, you know, for my mob, my people, acknowledgement is our people are the first scientists. So we've got a natural epiphany with science. And that's, you know, you can see that when you talk to kids that science is really everywhere. It's all around us. And I think that, you know, the biggest thing for Deadly Science is that visual factor, but also giving kids the opportunity. You know, just last week, I put a microscope in Warracunya School, remote community school, for the first time ever. They never had a microscope before that. And now just the world of discovery, the vocabulary growing, kids are learning about genes, they're learning about microorganisms. This is what we need to do to get more diverse. We need to have these conversations, and honestly, frank conversations, but those conversations need to lead to actions. And that's kind of what Deadly Science does, is that we love STEM and we love science, and you know, we support our mobs doing it. And you know, the best thing about me being an ambassador for STEM is that, you know, kids out there can see that I'm on the board for Science Technology Australia. They can see that I'm an Indigenous STEM champion, but I'm just a normal guy who loves science and just wants all kids everywhere, even non-Indigenous kids, to have equal education. You know, I want them to grow up strong and healthy. I want them to have access to fresh food. I want them to be able to use science to find solutions to problems. And I'm going to use a timeless quote, which I've used way too much, but education is freedom and science is hope. And the reason why we're all in science is because we all hope to find solutions to the answers to the questions we all have.
Sandra, can I just jump in here? I just want to add to this. I think what we need to understand is when we tell kids you can dream and be whatever you would like to be, we never tell them that depending on your skin color and sexual orientation, things could be difficult and sometimes not possible. And that, you know, I mean, and that's a reality. And until we acknowledge that is a reality, and we can't correct it. We can't live in a world where we're like, yeah, we're all the same. We're all on equal footing, because that's delusion and unreality. And you cannot, you know, I mean, you can't build a true and honest world out of a fictional, perfect utopia. And the other thing is something I do in all my diverse conversations is we have to grow beyond more affirmation and more agreement, because I don't think anyone, if you have a conversation with a human being and you're like, do you think we should all be equal? The answer is yes. No one is going to say no. If they say no, that's then an entire different category of people. But when you say yes to inclusion and when you say yes to being an ambassador, there's a call to action. There's an action that follows, and without that action, to me, as someone part of a minority group, if you agree that I should have equal rights, that is, it has a very short half-life. It gives me, I will nod and smile at you, but it does absolutely nothing for me if you don't follow through with yes, I think we should be equal. What can I do to help? What can I do to help? That is the work of the diversity. That is the diversity of inclusion. And yeah, again, minorities care about being enabled and being allowed to dream and and be all the things they want to be and contribute to all the things they want to contribute to. It's not a simple are we diverse? Are we not diverse? Are we diverse? How can we be more diverse? And what can we do to get there?
Thanks, Mohammed.
But I think it's also important to recognize, and I think that's true, we have to be out there, we have to be seen, and we do represent for children, for people growing up. Can I be a scientist? Little girls have to be able to say, oh yeah, I can be a scientist. It doesn't matter what, if I'm a girl or a boy, what I look like, what I decide to do with my life is possible because we're creating a world that allows that possibility for anybody. And reducing those limitations is really an important part of it. I think go ahead.
Sorry, I think the foundation blocks for creating sustainable change, they start from within. They start with that bit of resilience. They start with that, if someone's, behaving poorly or, and they're superior, we need to call them out. We need to hold them accountable, because, having that resilience to create, a society and a, essentially, an industry that is accepting to all. We need to make people accountable for their poor behavior. And I think, in the sense of, with young people that I work with, getting a microscope or a telescope is the foundations of a building block. It's a Lego piece to something else, and it's connector. And not every kid that I work with is going to become a scientist, but I sure as hell I'm going to make sure they believe that they can. And that's, and that starts with all of us. It starts from our passion, and then it ends with our purpose. Because really, why we're all in science is because we want to make the world a better place. And there's this perception of scientists that we're all cold, white, middle-aged people with lab coats, but it's actually the furthest thing from the truth. We have got, thousands of young, awesome scientists, women in science, minorities in science, that really some of the best discoveries in the world and the best engineering feats have come from those people. So we need to acknowledge that.
That's a great segue into one of the questions from our audience today. Kat put a question in, noting that Rashina mentioned silence of the wise, and exactly what you were also just kind of saying, Corey, about everybody or people needing to step up. Kat's asking, how can you contribute widely if you perhaps don't want to engage in social media? Can people in the panel they want to talk about ways that they engage or act as an ambassador that aren't on social media?
I can start. So this was hard for me personally. It was not easy because as a researcher in particular, we are so used to sort of punctuating everything we say with a reference. It has to be double checked and triple checked, and you have to make sure that it's factual. And the thing to realize is you can bring all of those good skills into a social media platform, but not go overboard with it where it's stopping you from sharing anything. So you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to share an opinion on everything. But if there is a relevant topic that's on media and you feel like you can contribute in a good way to that topic, and it relates to your research, and if each of us did that for our own topics, that would be enough, right?
I think, I can add this. I think authenticity is very important. When you care about something deeply, you find a way, and it doesn't have to be in social media. Because, for example, one of my greatest allies was in all my work was the head of equity diversity at the university, and then we were discussing the notion of when people transition, they don't necessarily need to go through the the process of having the official change of gender, because they're an expensive, inaccessible way to transition, and they want to change their preferred name, so they don't want to be dead named in a classroom. And then although that was quite a big aim because of all the complexity of ITS, because I can barely use my laptop, but so that conversation kind of led to a lot of diversity of work. So I consider the work that Lau and I kind of did, it wasn't in social media, and it was just trailblazing in the background, and it wasn't until 3-4 years later that you see the outcomes of it. And again, that is significant, and that is important, and we need to kind of abstract away from performance, performative. Again, that has a role, because people need to see the diversity. It's very important to see that stuff, but you need to consider impact and how much time it consumes. And if you have 5 minutes, I would give 3 minutes to real change, and maybe a minute or two to posting about it in general.
Yeah, thanks, Mama.
I will say I really dislike social media, so I fully understand that question. For me, I personally find the one-to-one or small group interaction a lot easier for me to discuss my science and my passion and why I want other people to get interested in science. And so I do a lot of schoolwork and STEM education in schools. My research kind of lends itself to working with the community a lot. So I work a lot with urban gardeners and kids in gardens. And I think it's also a good way to show, scientists can communicate. Scientists want to talk to people. Scientists want to hear your questions and understand the complexities of life and communicate in other ways.
I think, beyond social media, and I mean, obviously Deadly Science has got a pretty big social media sort of platform and a voice on social media, but I'll give you an example. I do a lot of schoolwork as well, and I go out to schools quite often. But last night I'm staying in Sydney, and I bumped into some Aboriginal kids that knew Deadly Science, and just spending 5 minutes talking with them and explaining to them, that look, things working around you, like a bus driving past, is a feat of engineering and sharing, and it's the observation of all things science and making it accessible. Where, I think that what we do well and what, us communicators that can communicate well is that, every time you talk to someone, you've got an opportunity to be a voice and share. And, that is a lot more personal than social media. For example, we're doing a Zoom session later this afternoon with Elko Island, Shepson College. And I always leave those Zoom sessions learning more about them than they do about me. So it's about the knowledge sharing, and that's something that's ingrained in our culture. We share knowledge. I got a call from an elder last night at 11 o'clock at night, and we were talking about fish traps till about midnight. And it's just a constant sharing factor. And I think, as an ambassador and as someone, again, that passion and that purpose, you want to share that. There's two roles to being a good scientist. There's DORing it, which is an acronym, do your own research, and then also being able to communicate it. Because if you can communicate it to young people, you can probably communicate it to politicians.
I think, though, there's also a part of that, and I think that daily conversations is correct. But the part of it, I think, starts even just in your own workspace, right? That normalizing the idea that you have to create space for different voices to come in, that you have to create space for different ways of communication to occur, and that there has to be this concerted effort to put that in place and to make sure that happens. Otherwise, going back to business as usual that stuff goes to the wayside often, and we can't let that happen.
And also, communicating diversity is an act of innovation. Giving people space does not subtract from other people's spaces. We don't have finite resources and kindness, and this is the idea of if we start to get in, allowing opportunity for more people, other people are going to have less opportunity. Actually, quite the opposite. It can be. It just needs kind of limited thinking is only limited by people with limited imagination, and we do need a little bit of more imagination if we're going to change the world. Also, status quo is bad news. The way things are, again, I always say this, when people say this is the way things are, what they mean is, I am satisfied with how much I'm getting out of the status quo, and I don't want it to change because I don't know what's going to happen if it changes. Well,
I'm going to go to another question from the audience, and I've got Martin. This one's for you, Corey.
Oh, great.
Martin's asking, how can we as scientists help Deadly Science besides making a donation? Well,
I've just built a video platform, which is a Zoom a Scientist platform. So you can sign up and be a scientist, and schools can book you for virtual conferences. We're still working out some bugs, so it's up and running now, but it'll be in a much smoother transition. I think stuff with helping with admin. I'm doing about 18-hour days at the moment. So any opportunities for volunteering in that way, I'm actually going to announce what we're doing next, which is going to be pretty awesome. And it's never been done before, but we're actually putting robotics kits into language. So we have to kind of invent new words with the language centres, but we're going to actually be putting robotics kits into schools that are based on first languages. And, this is important because this gives, again, those Lego blocks. These are Lego blocks for engineering. These are important for us. We need to be able to move forward. And I've also got a book coming out called The First Scientist, which is going to talk to you all about astronomy and chemistry and all you, it's a kid's book, so you have to get it for your kids. But honestly, I think that it's so important that we start working with first languages and developing resources that are connected to our first people, our first scientists.
That sounds fantastic, Corey, and I love the interaction between the STEM and the language, and really embedding the language across different subjects in schools. That just sounds like an incredible project. And Rashina, we're going to get all our superstars onto Corey's Sky for Scientist. I've got a question from Jake. Jake says, everyone supports diversity and inclusion until it comes to funding. So does the panel have anything to say about how they've overcome perhaps funding hurdles and how they go about, how can you find funding that works if you've got a passion for something?
I can start with this just because I started speaking. When it comes to funding, it is always tricky. And my general rule of thumb is the money is there. Like whenever people say we don't have funding, it means they don't think whatever you're pitching is worth it. And then that's kind of my lens when people neglect. It's neglection. You are neglecting diversity when you don't invest in it, and it will come back to you. The problem is you think you're kind of wasting money. You're not really. In the future. Back to my first analogy, an investment is getting electricity everywhere. So you can just throw your money at that and you'll get a great return. And also finding private donors is always important, because in Quiz and Science we look for private donors and people not with an excessive amount of money, but people who have the drive and they're always asking how they can help, and we tell them how to help. It's nice to give money because money helps us set up things. Money helps us help people because again, in most of inclusion work, it's all free work. We all kind of give our time freely, but sometimes you need a lot more resources than your time.
That's really cool. Taha, I'm going to add, I think there's the other side of it is embedding diversity into regular funding of other things, right? So I've been following up on the discussion forum as well as I can with all the excitement going on and comments. And one of the things people are noticing is this is a session on how to be a great ambassador for the STEM sector. This is not a session called diversity and inclusion, but look at the panel, right? And people are noticing this. So this is a second way of just embedding diversity into funding for something else, right? So whether it's your hiring panels, whether it's your, organizing cultural day events or whatever it is, or if you're forming a group of researchers to apply for funding, make sure that group is diverse. So those are, secondary ways of trying to get to that instead of not always having a diversity and inclusion banner. That's going back to Taha's point about electricity, right? It's become a point where we don't even notice it until it's gone.
I just want to say, so when I first started Deadly Science, I knocked on every single professor's door, and I only had 2 that were actually supportive of doing Deadly Science. The rest shut their doors in my face. And I did what most weirdos do, and I took up a second job to fund it. So again, it's that resilience factor. We've got to overcome that first wave. Once you overcome that first wave, they become a whole lot easier. And Deadly Science still today, we get our funding purely off donations. The corporate support, it's always a, you know, oh, we want to, you know, get 15 photos with Aboriginal kids in community with our staff, and it's like, what do you like? Why? You know, you should be a good corporate, and corporate responsibility comes from within, and government as well. And that these things take time, and you know, these are, you know, we as diverse people and, you know, minorities that are chasing funding for these much needed programs, you know, these things take time because sometimes it takes a while for the powers to actually see the difference. So I guess my little message out there for everyone wanting to start stuff is just be brave and be strong. And I think, you know, surround yourself with really good people. And, you know, for Deadly Science, you know, we've had, you know, such strong support because there's a need for this, you know, and this will grow. And I think that, you know, the biggest thing for me is that if people are going to be deadly, they need to be brave enough to make a change, and they need to embrace what they believe in. And, you know, the old dinosaurs that have the racist views, they're dying out. You don't want to replace them.
I think also you don't make change until you say something, right? So sometimes in order to make that the status quo, you have to say in that meeting, well, we need to consider this, or that has to be funded. Because I think there is, Mohammed's right, there's funding there,
saying it,
but if no one says it, it won't get funded. And so we all just have to be
and you keep saying it long enough, and sorry, stop. You keep saying it long enough, sometimes people will just give you funding to go away. Like, just like, go and do it. They'll be like, you think you can fix it? Go and do it. And then they give you the money. You just keep saying it. Never stop saying it.
I think squeaky wheel works in this situation. You know, squeaky wheel.
We're always at the end here, guys. We've got about a minute and a half left. And I've got a question from Anita, which is, what's your top personal reason for being an ambassador for science? So you guys just think about that and give me like one sentence. What's your top reason for being an ambassador for science?
I am everything I wanted to be as a child. And I want everyone, like, against the odds, and I want everyone who is different to be able to do that, because I lucked out so much, and I just want people to not have to rely on luck to be where they want to be. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm kind of similar in that. Like, I love nature, I love the environment, and I want everyone to love the environment and have access to the environment. But I feel like the only way to do that is to set policy that allows for that.
I think sorry, you go.
No, you go, Corey.
I think my main reason is I want every kid everywhere to have access to the love of nature, space, and discovery. And I think, you know, the biggest thing for us is that we need to encourage our young people to keep asking questions until they're our age adults, you know. It's how we learn, it's how we discover new things. And I just, you know, when we send a telescope or we send a microscope out and we've got kids looking through them, it's a whole world of discovery. And that's why I do it.
Yep, for me, it's twofold. There's the love of science, and then what I do in software engineering. And secondly, just breaking stereotypes. I love breaking stereotypes. So, yeah. If I am a scientist, this is what a scientist looks like. If that breaks your bubble, I've done my job.
Well, thank you, guys. This has been just absolutely amazing experience. Thank you so much for the session today. And I'm sure our audience will all be thanking you in the discussion forum now. To our delegate, next up is the National Press Club address by Australian Chief Scientist Kathy Foley. So if you've got tickets for this event, head on over to the Press Club, and doors open at 11:30. And you must be seated by 11:50. For those of you around Australia, the address is going to be broadcast live on ABC iView starting at 12:30 p.m. And the link to join that is in the app. It's on the website. You can find it. So enjoy that address. And we'll see you later in the afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.